Throughout my professional and personal life, what I've struggled with often is finding a place to live that is both affordable and transit-oriented. This is especially an acute problem in North America, where very few cities have mass transit systems remotely comparable to their European counterparts. For someone like myself who is low vision, legally blind, public transportation is not a nice to have. It's not a luxury product. It is a necessity in my daily operation within a urban environment. There are some cities in this country, like Los Angeles, which, well, yes, they are expanding the metro, and yes, that is good. The cohesive whole that is Los Angeles consists of largely single-family homes in suburban-style developments. You're building a metro. Wonderful. But please tell me that those units you're building, which are transit-oriented, won't immediately be twice as expensive as their non-TOD counterparts. The data seems to suggest that if you don't want to rely on a car in the United States, or if, like me, you medically can't, you're limited to a few select places to live, and you just have to choose. Do you want to live in the city and pay a lot in rent, or relying on others to get you to and from work, or to and from the grocery store, or to and from social activities? It's a trade-off, but it's one that really nags at you. The most popular video on my channel so far is called Why Europe Feels More Accessible, and if you haven't checked out that video, I encourage you to do so. On that piece, I received several comments telling me that I was broadly generalizing and that a place like Debrecen has a public transportation issue where things are very crowded and there's often delays and such. I agree that is a problem, but let me contrast this with my experience living in Washington, D.C. I would sometimes ride the bus as opposed to taking the metro, and routinely, when I would use the bus, it would be basically empty on a day where you would think people would be commuting into work. They had level boarding, they had a tap-on, tap-off system, you could use your Smart Trip card, so people could use them. They just chose not to. I would argue that it's a lot easier to solve a problem of overcrowding than it is to solve a problem where your ridership is down and is continuing to decrease. Even though the average Hungarian can't afford to live in central Budapest, and I imagine this is the case similarly in Poland, Germany, Romania, etc., you don't have to in order to live in a transit-oriented neighborhood. For all of the obvious negatives that came along with the socialist period in Central Europe and Balkans, Eastern Europe, the one thing that socialist governments tried to do right, I would argue, is the large, dense housing and public transportation. Now, of course, there are outliers. Riga, I covered, but Belgrade has also struggled for something like 60 years to get a metro system in place. They're on track now, but it's taken a while. Even so, these two cities, like so many others, have suburban railway networks as a default to get people from surrounding communities into the city center. To better illustrate what I mean when I say you don't need to live in the city center in order to live in an affordable, transit-oriented neighborhood, I would like to compare Budapest, Hungary, and Washington, D.C. First, let's look at Washington, D.C., a place where up until recently I called home. The average median wage in Washington, D.C. is $73,000 a year, with most people earning somewhere between $40,000 and $115,000. The average rent in Washington, D.C. overall is $2,200 a month, with places like DuPont Circle showing an average rent of $3,000 a month. Unless you have 3 roommates, your rental costs are going to be very high compared to your net income. Neighborhoods and cities that have relatively less expensive rent are those in Southeast DC and Northeast DC, with the latter two regions of the city having much less transit options by comparison to their Western counterparts. Now let's turn our attention to the Central European capital of Budapest. The average person in Budapest who works full-time earns approximately 6.9 million forint each year. According to recent exchange rates, that is approximately 20,000 US dollars a year. According to Daily News Hungary, which listed out a very helpful guide of average prices for apartments in each district of the city, roughly speaking, you're not going to find an apartment in District 5, 6, or 7. Traditionally, this is the center of the city. Rents in these districts are well north of 300,000 forint a month. You're not going to struggle to find a place in outlying districts like 13, 10, 18, 9. Rent in these outlying areas is easily 2/3 to half of what you might find in the more popular areas of the city. And one of the biggest benefits to Budapest that I can see as an outsider is that if you live in one of these outlying districts, like say you live in District 13, you don't need to live directly around the metro station in order to have access to that piece of public transportation. You can be confident in the knowledge that if you live 20 minutes out from a metro station, you can find a tram line or a bus station somewhere along your walk, which will cut your commute time in half. Such a thing is, I imagine, also not a foreign concept in other nations of the Balkans and Central Europe. Sure, the public transportation might not be world-class, we're not talking Tokyo, but it is reliable, it is convenient, and it is enmeshed in such a way where, broadly, you don't need to live right next to it in order to use it. You don't need to drive to it in order to use it. Such a thing is foreign to many American cities. If you've enjoyed today's video, please remember to subscribe for more, leave a comment down below letting me know what you think, and share this video around to somebody who you feel may find it equally interesting. I sincerely appreciate all of your support. My name is Imre, and you've been watching Uniquely Unseen.